Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to IGCSE Success, your one-stop shop for everything IGCSE English. So in today's video, I'll be breaking down Chingonyi's poem Curfew, which is one of the 15 you guys need to know pretty well if you are doing IGCSE literature and you are not studying songs of ourselves. This is actually the third poem we've covered, so we are making good progress, albeit slightly slow progress. We're making progress. So I'll be looking at the meaning, so what the poem is about, who the speaker is, the structure and form, language and imagery, poetic devices, maybe a little bit on the sounds, and finally tone and mood. And of course, if you want to skip my waffling, I won't be offended. You can jump straight to the annotations, you absolutely can, but I do really recommend watching the whole video, making notes and annotating your own copy of the poem, which I will leave in the description box below. And I will finish up with an exemplar paragraph so you can see exactly what true success looks like. You ready? Let's go. So let's take a read of Kayo Chingonyi's poem Curfew. This was a soldier curfew, he says, apropos of nothing, the way the best stories come round this table that just about holds us. Boali was all but eaten, the flash of thought, a flame lighting up his face. He rests the tip of a finger in the space between his eyes. Past curfew, there was no warning shots. Auntie chips in as if this were little more than a scene they were rehearsing. You had to have a man with you at all times, especially at night, so my cousin would walk me home in trousers and squared shoulders she could pass. She smiles a knowing smile at our scandalised faces, faces we've bent into anguished shapes when she could smell a lie, but let us improvise wildly until, hoist by our respective petards, we came clean, deferring to the knowledge of a woman who was a girl who could climb out of a window in hot pants and platforms, dance to the last ache in her legs and make it back before the cockerel crowed morning. So before we start breaking down the techniques and all of the fun stuff, let's be clear about what this poem Curfew is actually about. Now, throughout the poem, we are essentially witnessing a moment around a table, probably after a shared meal, when memories begin to surface. Someone recalls the days during a military curfew, evoking a period of political tension and heightened danger, presumably in late 20th century Africa, when moving around at night could carry serious risks. Now, Auntie, who is central to the poem, then adds her own story about needing a man to escort her safely home and how her cousin would disguise herself to protect her. What's interesting is that whilst everyone is listening seems shocked by these stories, Auntie remains completely composed, even amused. She's aware of their reactions but doesn't share their sense of scandal. Now, the poem closes with a vivid image of her younger self climbing out of windows in hot pants and platform shoes to dance until dawn. Proof that fighting the patriarchy can absolutely involve being scantily dressed and a good old party. At its heart, guys, this is a poem about family, storytelling, about the resilience and independence of women like Auntie, and about how ordinary moments like eating together can suddenly open a window onto the past. And to summarise, so a group sits around a table sharing memories after a meal. Someone recalls life under military curfew in Africa. Auntie tells how her cousin disguised herself to escort her home safely. The listeners are shocked. Auntie is calm and amused. It ends with Auntie sneaking out to dance all night, and it celebrates storytelling, resilience, and hidden histories. So now that we've clarified the meaning, it's also really important to think carefully about the speaker. Now, in poetry, working out who is telling the story and what we learn about them helps us understand why the poem is presented in a particular way. Now, here the speaker seems to be an observer, most likely a younger relative or someone from the next generation who is listening to these stories around the table. We can tell they have a clear respect for Auntie, but also a sense of curiosity and maybe even mild shock at what she reveals. There's this kind of warm familiarity in the way the speaker describes a scene, but also an awareness that these memories very much belong to a time and an experience that they didn't directly live through. Now, this distance is important because it creates space for both admiration and reflection, and it shapes the slightly amused, affectionate tone running throughout the poem. So identifying the speaker really helps us see how personal perspective influences the poem's mood and how the past is being shared with the present. And to summarise, so the speaker is an observer, probably a younger relative. They respect Auntie but also feel curiosity and mild shock. They describe events with warmth and familiarity. There's a sense of distance. They didn't experience these events themselves. This perspective creates a reflective, slightly amused tone. And lastly, understanding the speaker shows how personal viewpoint shapes mood and meaning. Next, let's think about structure, because how a poem is organized on the page often tells us just as much as the words themselves. Now, Curfew is written in free verse, which means it doesn't follow a fixed rhyme scheme or regular meter, and this really allows the poem to feel more natural and conversational, almost as if we are overhearing a real exchange around the table rather than reading something too, I guess, polished or artificial. In many ways, it feels as though we are catapulted into this intimate world, one which we probably shouldn't be in, with Chingonyi carefully positioning us right at the dinner table, drawing us into the storytelling as if we are a part of it ourselves. It's also arranged in tercets or 3-line stanzas. Now, using tercets creates a sense of steady progression. Each small unit of memory builds on the last, gradually uncovering more detail as the poem moves from a, I guess, more casual comment to a vivid recollection. The regularity of the stanza length contrasts slightly with the unpredictable flowing memories, which helps balance clarity with spontaneity. Now, structurally, the poem moves between the present moment, everyone gathered after a meal, and memories from the past. It begins quite conversationally with someone mentioning the military curfew, almost in passing, and then shifts into Auntie's story in more detail. The ending, in my opinion, stands out in particular, closing with that striking image of Auntie climbing out of the window to dance all night and returning before dawn. Overall, these structural choices, free verse, tercets and shift in focus, they all work together, guys, to create a layered effect, mirroring, I guess, how family stories often surface. One memory sparking another until the past feels alive again. And even though it reads as, I guess, spontaneous, it's Chingonyi who has carefully shaped this progression to evoke warmth, admiration and reflection. So to summarise, Curfew is written in free verse, creating a natural conversational feel. It is arranged in tercets, which are 3-line stanzas for steady progression. It moves between present storytelling and past memories. The poem starts casually, then shifts into detailed recollection. It ends with Auntie sneaking out to dance all night. The structure very much mirrors how family stories build and connect, and it is carefully shaped to feel spontaneous but evoke warmth and reflection. Now let's take a look at language and imagery, because Chingonyi's word choices and the pictures they create are of course central to this poem and its impact. Just to be clear, this is an overview of some of the most pertinent points, and I'll go through more detailed annotations later in this video. Now, one of the first things you notice is the, I guess, casual, almost offhand language. For example, apropos of nothing, which suggests that these memories surface spontaneously without warning. Now, this conversational tone makes the storytelling feel authentic and unforced. Chingonyi also uses vivid, precise imagery to really bring the past to life. When he describes the flash of thought, a flame lighting up his face, it creates a clear visual of that moment when a memory suddenly sparks into view. Now, the image of Auntie again climbing out of a window in hot pants and platforms, it's of course particularly striking. It's almost playful, it's humorous, it's cinematic. It really captures her youth and defiance in a single snapshot. Did someone say girl power? You can also see how simple phrases such as knowing smile carry weight. That small detail suggests Auntie's confidence and her awareness that she has lived through things her listeners can hardly even imagine. Overall, guys, the language, I guess, balances warmth, respect, and a touch of humour, whilst the imagery helps us see Auntie not just as an older relative, but as a young woman who really once took risks and enjoyed her freedom. And again, it's important to remember that these choices are deliberate. Chingonyi selects every word and image to create this layered, intimate atmosphere. And to summarise, so the poem begins with some casual offhand language, for example, apropos of nothing, and this makes the memories feel spontaneous. There's vivid imagery that brings the scenes to life, for example, a flame lighting up his face. There's that striking detail of Auntie in hot pants and platforms, and this very much captures her youthful defiance. Simple phrases such as knowing smiles suggest confidence and experience. The language mixes warmth, respect and gentle humour. And remember, every choice is deliberate, creating an intimate, layered atmosphere. Right, let's look briefly at poetic devices, because these techniques really help shape the tone and make certain details stand out. Again, I'll just highlight 3 particularly striking examples here, and we'll look at more specific lines later in this video. First, of course, there's the enjambment, where the sentences run over the line breaks without a pause. Now, this is particularly noteworthy because it creates a sense of continuity and flow, reflecting how memories often come out in, I guess, an unfiltered conversational way. Second, you can see the use of the metaphor, especially in the description of the thought as a flame lighting up his face. And of course, this vivid comparison very much captures the sudden spark of memory and helps us visualize the energy that memories can bring to a person. And third, the poem uses contrast effectively. There's a striking tension between the danger of the military curfew and the almost playful image of Auntie dancing all night in hot pants. Gotta love that image. And this emphasizes, of course, her resilience and her refusal to be defined by fear. As for sound, there's the occasional sprinkling of alliteration, but nothing that really stands out as a central feature or contributes significantly to the overall effect, in my opinion. I think the poem's impact comes much more from its imagery, structure and tone than from any strong sound patterns, in this poem anyway. And to summarise, the enjambment creates flow and mimics unfiltered memories. That metaphor, a flame lighting up his face, shows sudden recall and energy. That contrast between curfew danger and Auntie's carefree dancing highlights resilience. There's the occasional alliteration, but sound isn't a major feature here. And the poem's effect, in my opinion anyway, relies more on imagery, structure and tone. So before we unpick this poem to death and look at a whole bunch of annotations, let's take a look at tone and mood, because these elements really shape how the poem feels to read and what kind of response it draws out from us. Now, overall, the tone is warm, it's reflective. There's this real sense of admiration from Auntie and the way she navigated difficult circumstances with confidence and humour. Now, the speaker never sounds judgmental or overly sentimental. Instead, there's this, I guess, gentle respect that comes through in the language and the way the memories are shared. Now, the mood or the feeling the poem creates for the reader is, well, for me anyway, is a blend of nostalgia and quiet celebration. Even though the stories touch on danger and restriction and oppression in many ways, there's this underlying sense of resilience and joy. Now, Auntie's memories, especially the image of her dancing in tall dawn, really leaves us with a feeling of vitality rather than fear. Together, the tone and mood invite us to see these moments not as fragments of the past, but as evidence of a life fully lived in spite of the constraints surrounding it. And to summarise, the poem's tone is warm, reflective and gently respectful. It shows admiration for Auntie's confidence and humour. The mood blends nostalgia with quiet celebration, and despite danger, there's an underlying sense of resilience and joy. And the poem leaves the reader with a feeling of vitality and appreciation for a life fully lived. Okay, so we're now moving on to the annotation stage, guys. This is where you really want to be focused, because it's your chance to pin down all of the details that will really make your analysis stand out. Now, you can download a copy of this poem from the link in the description box below. Print it out if you can, grab your highlighters and get ready to listen carefully. Now, as I go through each stanza, feel free to pause the video and take your time annotating all of the key techniques and ideas onto your own copy. So let's start by looking at this opening stanza together. Now, you'll notice how Chingonyi begins very abruptly, almost as if the memory just, I guess, bursts into conversation without any build-up. That sudden, unplanned moment instantly tells us, the reader, that this isn't a casual chat. There's real weight behind what's being shared. Even though the tone sounds somewhat calm on the surface, there's this real sense of danger sitting beneath it, reminding us that these stories come from a period of political unrest. What's powerful here, in my opinion, is how this opening draws us straight into the scene. It feels intimate, it feels unfiltered, almost like we're sitting there right at the table with everyone else. And even in the way the story is told in, I guess, a matter-of-fact way, you can sense the resilience of the people around the table, how they've learned to carry these memories without letting them completely overshadow the present moment. Now, if you look at the line, "This was a soldier curfew," you get the sense that these significant memories are being shared almost spontaneously over dinner. That phrase, apropos of nothing, really captures how the past can surface out of nowhere when people feel comfortable enough to talk openly. Now, the table itself becomes quite symbolic. It's a family gathering where everyone is squeezed in so tightly they almost don't fit. That detail connotes intimacy, closeness, and a real sense of unity, even though they are discussing times that were frightening or uncertain. Now, in terms of form, notice how Chingonyi uses free verse here and indeed throughout the rest of the poem. There's no strict rhyme or meter, and that very much mirrors the way memories and stories often spill out naturally when people start reminiscing. But at the same time, he's chosen to structure the poem in tercets. Those 3 neat line stanzas gives a bit of order and thoughtfulness to how the memories are shared. It's free flowing, but it's still carefully shaped so that every detail has impact. Right, let's take a look at the next stanza. Now, with stanza 2, we start with the mention of boali, all but eaten. Now, boali is a traditional dish. I hope I didn't butcher the pronunciation. So straight away, this detail roots the scene firmly in African culture and creates a, I guess, sense of place. You can almost imagine everyone gathered around the table, finishing their meal together before the conversation drifts into memory or storytelling. Then we get that really vivid moment, the flash of thought, a flame lighting up his face. Now, this is a powerful metaphor, of course. It shows how a recollection can arrive all at once, sudden and intense, almost like it's igniting something inside of him. It feels indelible, like the kind of memory that doesn't fade easily. But that flame also has another layer of meaning. It's bright and alive, but there's an undertone of volatility. It could be suggesting that recalling the past isn't always safe or comfortable. It can be unpredictable, maybe even a little unsettling. And finally, look at that small, precise detail. He rests the tip of a finger in the space between his eyes. This tiny gesture is pensive, it's contemplative. It tells us that even though the memory seems to flare up out of nowhere, its impact still remains. He's taking a moment to process it, and in that pause, you can see just how much it still matters. So let's move on to this next stanza where the tone of the poem really starts to shift. Now here, Chingonyi takes us straight from that warm domestic atmosphere into something much darker. When he writes, "Past curfew, there were no warning shots," it's a blunt declarative statement that immediately emphasizes how harsh and uncompromising those curfew rules were. There was no negotiation, just a threat of sudden violence if you were caught outside. Now, you can also see how this creates a contrast with the calm, almost, I guess, casual way the conversation begins. We go from a relaxed family meal to the reality of quite serious, life-threatening memories, all in the space of a few lines. That's why the tone shifts here. Storytelling that started off sounding gentle suddenly becomes quite dark and serious. Then look at the way Auntie responds. She chips in as if this were little more than a scene they were rehearsing. That's a really striking simile there. It almost makes the danger feel routine, as though these life or death situations were so common they became just, I guess, another performance. At the same time, this reflects Auntie's resilience, her ability to remember something so threatening without showing fear or, I guess, self-pity. Overall, this part of the poem shows how the past can really intrude on the present and how memories that should be terrifying are often told with a kind of matter-of-fact acceptance. Now, this next stanza really reveals a lot about both the social context and the quiet acts of resistance happening in everyday life. Now, you'll notice how Chingonyi uses enjambment here to have a man with you at all times, especially, and then the line runs straight into the next thought. Now, that interrupted flow very much reflects how these rules about safety and curfew constantly intrude into people's lives. Remember, if we're going to comment on enjambment, guys, we always need to link it to meaning, as you have to with every technique that you identify. Now, it's almost as if the narrative itself gets interrupted by the need to remember the restrictions imposed on them. There's also a clear sense of patriarchal control here. If we're thinking about the wider message, women's freedom was limited to the point that they couldn't even walk home safely without a man, and it really underlines how much danger and I guess inequality shaped daily routine. But what I find most striking is how Auntie and her cousin found ways to push back. Woohoo! When she says in trousers and squared shoulders she could pass, it's such a vivid and powerful image, guys. Now, the cousin's disguise becomes a small act of defiance and survival. She takes on a man role just to protect her. Now, that choice also, of course, subverts gender norms, and by simply changing her clothing and body language, the cousin challenges the assumptions that only men could offer safety. It's a really clever and quietly, I guess, rebellious moment that shows how women found ways to navigate an oppressive system without giving up their agency. Okay, so let's look at this stanza together where the focus very much shifts again. Now here the poem moves away from describing past events and instead zooms in on Auntie observing everyone else around the table. So a really effective structural choice that Chingonyi makes here. Now this shift in focus is important because it shows how storytelling doesn't just bring back memories, it also reveals how the listeners react. Now, when Auntie smiles a quote-unquote knowing smile, there's so much going on in that tiny gesture. It's a moment full of experience, it's full of wisdom, and a little bit of quiet amusement. She knows the past in a way the younger generation, I guess, can't fully grasp. Now, you can see how that adjective scandalize highlights just how uncomfortable and shocked the listeners are. They're hearing about things that they feel almost unimaginable to them. And then you have this really vivid image of faces we've bent into anguish shapes. Now, it's partly describing their genuine shock at Auntie's story, but it also hints that in the past, they've, I guess, sometimes performed their own exaggerated reactions or embellished their own stories. And it's a clever way of showing that contrast, Auntie's calm authenticity versus their more dramatic responses. Finally, I really love how the poem suggests that even though Auntie could smell a lie, she would just let them improvise. It's a gentle, generous thing to do. She allows them that, I guess, space to pretend and learn without ever needing to correct them. And it really captures her patience and the warmth in their relationship. So let's take a look at the penultimate stanza and what it tells us about storytelling overall. Now, this stanza really shows another clear contrast. On one hand, you have the younger generation telling their own embellished stories, sometimes exaggerating or performing. On the other hand, you have Auntie's lived reality. Her experiences are authentic and carry much more weight. Now, that phrase, hoist by our respective petards, is an idiom that basically means they got caught out by their own tricks. It has a gentle mocking tone, I guess, as if they can laugh at themselves now for trying to sound more impressive than they really were. Hey, we're all guilty of embellishing the odd story here and there, right? Right, so, gosh, I digress. Eventually, they come clean and they defer to the knowledge of Auntie. Now, that deference is important because it shows respect. They're acknowledging that her wisdom comes from real experience, not just from stories told secondhand. And finally, the line, "a woman who was a girl who could climb," is such a brilliant, brilliant piece of characterization. It reminds us that Auntie was once a bold, rebellious, and completely independent woman. Now, even though she's older now, that spirit hasn't disappeared. It's just become part of the person that she is today. And this ending really sums up the power of storytelling for this family in particular. It has the transformative power to uncover hidden histories, it challenges pretense, and it ultimately creates a deeper connection across the generations. So this last stanza, guys, it's pretty awesome. Chingonyi creates, I guess, a moment that feels almost cinematic. Auntie is climbing out of the window in hot pants and platforms, which of course is a very striking image, one that we probably won't forget too soon, and it contrasts sharply with all of the oppressive curfew rules we've seen earlier on. Now, this detail is all about freedom, her refusal to be controlled or held back even in a time of restriction and, I guess, oppression. Now, the line "dance to the last ache in her legs" is a great example of hyperbole if you wanted to comment on that, and it exaggerates how far she would go to enjoy herself, suggesting, I guess, an unstoppable spirit and a determination to live fully no matter what. This is a brilliant example of characterization. In just a few lines, she comes across as confident, independent, and completely unwilling to let fear or oppression define her. Finally, when she makes it back before the cockerel crowed morning, there's a lovely sense of secrecy and youthful adventure. It's almost like she's slipping back into her ordinary life before anyone can catch her out. Overall, in my opinion, this ending really celebrates Auntie's resilience and spirit, and it shows how storytelling doesn't just record danger, it also keeps alive these small rebellious moments that make life feel whole and worth remembering. So let's end the video by looking at an exemplar paragraph, and I've just made up an exam styled question, and that is: how does Chingonyi powerfully present the impact of storytelling in Curfew? From the opening of the poem, Chingonyi powerfully presents the impact of storytelling in revealing hidden histories and creating connection between Auntie and the younger guest. Chingonyi begins by describing how one of the guests casually remarks that this was a soldier curfew, immediately creating a sense of tension and danger beneath the relaxed atmosphere. Chingonyi's use of an abrupt opening conveys how the memory emerges suddenly and unplanned, yet still carries significant emotional weight. This calm retelling draws the reader into an intimate world of the guests, as if we are sitting at the table alongside them. Additionally, it reflects their resilience, as the poem transports us back to a time of political unrest in Africa, when simply moving around at night could be life-threatening. Yet the guests are able to share these memories with striking composure and even a hint of humour. Furthermore, Chingonyi shows how storytelling brings memories to life with sudden intensity and deep reflection. Chingonyi depicts the flash of thought, a flame lighting up his face, immediately conveying how storytelling can trigger a vivid and powerful recollection. Chingonyi's use of striking imagery creates a vivid picture of a memory arriving with sudden intensity. The flame acts as a symbol. The recollection feels bright and alive, but it also carries an undertone of volatility, hinting at the unpredictable nature of remembering difficult experiences. This sudden, intense moment shows how memories can resurface as indelible impressions that remain with the speaker long after the events themselves have passed. And that's all for today, guys. If you've made it all the way to the very end, I appreciate you. As always, I hope this video has been useful. What do you think of Curfew? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn the bell icon on, all of that fun stuff, which I'm sure you've done anyway. And I will see you again very soon. Until next time, bye-bye.